All right, good evening, protectRs. Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. I'm Greg LaBeouf. I got Coach Brad Vanderleit here with me tonight. Dustin is away. And listen, tonight I thought this would be a really cool episode because this is kind of a more inside look to what I consider to be a little bit more advanced work. But I titled this one, How to Add a Nitrous Oxide System to Your protectR Mindset. Right, and again, I know I couldn't pass up the reference because I happened to see just a clip of the Fast and the Furious, the original. It's the only one I've ever seen, but they had that, and again, of course, hitting the nitrous. And I just thought, this is such an interesting parallel, how we add that fucking real boost, that turbocharge to the warrior or protectR mindset. So I want to share that with you tonight because there's 3 easy steps that you can do that will turbocharge that warrior mindset. So we're going to dive into that tonight. So hang with us, back in 30 seconds. Hey everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LaBeouf, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted murder to weaponizing my mind and body, mastering the tool of violence so that I can protect myself and my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, we are back. All right, everybody. So listen, tonight's episode, how do you add a nitrous oxide system to your warrior mindset or your protectR mindset? This is such, Brad, you know what we're talking about. Obviously, we call this staging. The process I want to share, the 3-step staging process. It's such a powerful process. And, I was trying to actually pinpoint when we added this system. And it's been 12 to 15 years, I think, somewhere in there. It's been a while, but I started to notice something when we were training, and it was I hate filler, meaning that whenever I'm training, right, training is always about one thing, and that's getting better. And one of the things I hate the most is I hate filler, meaning that things that aren't directly related to getting you better. Now, in certain contexts, right, context determines the content. Some of these things that I consider to be filler, they have a purpose. Right. But for us, our sole mission is to weaponize good men. Right. It's every time we train, it's to make people safer. Right. So whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or a combination, make people safer. And so when people come in and we are training, or when we get together to train, it's very, very focused because it's not about the quantity of time. It's about the quality of time. And we've, mentioned this before, and Brad, you know that, and I can't wait to actually get your insights on this. But I have had some of the best training sessions have been 30-minute, 20-minute, 45-minute training sessions. I've had some phenomenal ones that are, we're big believers in prolonged extended exposure. So we do, combat schools that are, 8 hours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 3 full days where you're just deep diving things. But here's the thing with that. Most people cannot do that. They can't sustain prolonged extended exposure like that. You have to actually be trained and conditioned and have the endurance, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally to stay in the moment, right? And so that comes back to where what I want to share with people tonight is how do you turbocharge your protectR mindset? How do you develop that type of powerful front focus, right? So that you can actually do sustained, prolonged, training events, protocols. And so anyways, what I'm getting at is that about 12 to 15 years ago, I just started to notice when people would come into training, there is always the fucking warm up, right? Like everybody warms up. And warm up, I started to hate that term because I just saw all the fucking filler that goes into warming up. And that was people come in, and of course it makes sense because people are coming from wherever they're coming from in life, right? So they're coming from work, they're coming from family, they're coming from some other event, they're coming from some errand, and then they all drive, everyone everyone shows up, and then it's like people drift in, people get changed, and then people are standing around, and of course people start to have this process of how they warm up. And really when people are warming up, they're standing around, they're talking about their day, they're talking about fucking some movie or some shit they're streaming or all this shit that doesn't matter. Right, it's all secondary noise, and then typically in a training session, people start with, okay, let's stretch our bodies out, let's warm up and stretch, and it's just all fucking useless, right? So I don't know. Maybe before we even get into the whole process, Brad, what do you remember about the warm up part of it? You know what I mean? And I mean, let's start there maybe with how you feel about that stuff.
Yeah, like if I was to go way, way back, you know, um, I think there was evolutions of it, right? But with the warm up, you're right. Like it was very much people would come in and would be nonchalant. And
Yeah,
I think and I won't bridge into this too much, but they were just like, well, I need to warm up my body.
yeah,
So like when you talk about it's like, oh well, they're chit chatting about this, that, and the next thing, it's because they were warming up their body
yeah,
physically, right?
hundred
They
percent.
didn't have any emotional connection to it. But even with that being said, is yeah, they warmed up their body, but how they've always done it for
Yeah,
probably absolutely every single thing physical that they've ever done. The same way that they would have went to the gym, the same
yeah,
way that if they're going to go swimming, the same way if they're going to do whatever, they just warmed up. I got to get my muscles loose. I got to do this thing. So they naturally fell into this routine. But it's like, let's not even say it, like, let's take the mental out of it because we're not there yet. But it's like you're preparing your body to train.
mm,
That's even way better than just warming up, right?
yeah,
Because at least
yeah,
you're doing things that are going to be conducive to the physical actions that you're going to take,
yeah,
right? But
yes,
even that, people weren't doing that. They were
yeah,
just like, oh, I'm going to stretch this muscle out because I think I should. But there was never it was the connectedness
yeah,
of everything, you
mm.
know. Like if you know that you're doing something physical, it's like, well, why wouldn't you focus on that? And I'll start going into it.
I know it's hard. It's hard not to, right? But I
Yeah.
think the thing we need to get people to understand is the three-step process we're about to share with you, right? Like, really is a nitrous oxide system. It's a fucking boost. It turbocharges the right mindset. And here's the thing: I'll take the word that you said, right? There's a massive disconnect. Like when people start warming up their body, of course they're thinking, "Well, I don't want to get injured. I'm about to do something physical and stuff like that." But let's pause right there. Training when it comes to weaponizing and training to protect your family is not just a physical endeavor, right? If you just said, I'm going to prepare my body, so I'm stretching my hamstrings because I don't want to pull a hamstring. I'm stretching, and loosening my back because I don't want to pull that muscle, or I'm loosening up my neck and stuff. Listen, that's all good things, right? Obviously, because you don't want to suffer any type of an injury. But what I'm getting at is that it's really disconnected. It's so general in its application. And most people, they don't even fucking know really how to stretch or warm up their body. But what I'm saying is that when you look at professionals, like when you look at pro, like tier one warriors, you look at even Olympic athletes, when you really look at the highest level of individuals that are really engaged in something, they don't just warm up, right? They are always integrating the mindset, right? There's the human weapon system, right? It's the emotional system, the psychological system, and then the physical system, right? So we feel, we think, and then we act. So those three systems have to be integrated. And again, because when it comes to combat, you don't always have a lot of time. Time's the greatest gift. Meaning that, like, you might only have in one day because you're busy with life and this and that. You might get 30 minutes to put in a protocol. You might only get 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The days that you got an hour, 2 hours, or you can train 4 or 5 times a week, that's a gift. And at times in your life, maybe you can do that. So again, what we're talking about is you can't have any filler. So when you walk into a place, when we all get together and we say, okay, let's get ready to train. When they come in, we have this process called a staging process. So I don't ever nobody warms up. You stage. Right? Now, I'm gonna pause here because anybody that listens to this understand that the three steps that we're going to share with you right now, this staging process, this is how you learn how to activate your emotional system, psychological system, and physical system. It's how you integrate them and do what's something that we call clicked in. It's how you snap these things into the right state, which is called ozone, optimal zone of natural excellence. Right? Most people understand, even with no experience, they understand that peak performance is a state, but it is
Mhm.
not just a physical state. It is a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state. That's the flow state. That's the ozone. Okay, so most people go, oh, I get you got to get in the zone, you got to get into the state. Warming up does not, or is a very inefficient way to achieve that state. Right? That's what staging is. So we got rid of warming up, man, and we teach a staging process, a three-step process, so that people actually can practice how, no matter where they come from, they can literally click in or snap themselves into an optimal state. Now in training, right, staging. In training, you want to snap into an optimal state for learning, right, absorbing, processing, and executing, right? Then you rinse and repeat. AAR, after action, review it. You learn, process, you're in that type of learning, growing, training, doing state. Now, one of the things I want people to have is that we teach a staging process so you can start to learn to develop and flex these muscles. Now, staging can take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, as long as 30 minutes. Because you're working this process, and for many people, they've never been shown a process like this. They don't know how to stage. They come in and go, oh, I got to do some arm circles and do some jumping jacks, and I got to sit down and stretch my legs and stuff. And it's like, I mean, to me, that's like shit that you would have learned in kindergarten. Like, you're weaponizing. You're telling me that you are the one. You're the first responder for your family. You don't just come into training, which is professional training, right? And sit down and go, I better make sure my calves are loose. It's disconnected from everything. Why would you waste 15 to 20 minutes just stretching your body out, like warming up your body? It's very ineffective. It's amateur. Okay, so a staging process interconnects the physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual, and it clicks everything into this state. Now, the other side is that 12, and again, the better you get, the quicker the process becomes, but that 12 to 20 minute process of staging to click in, getting into optimum state, you learned that. And then when you start getting good at that, that can become, or that the next step with that is to learn what's called a combat stage. Now, combat staging is visceral. Combat staging is like you literally learn to build a trigger. It's like operant conditioning, stimulus response. Because the ultimate thing of learning to stage is that in training, you have the gift of time. Nobody's coming into training and trying to cut your throat. No one's trying to assault your family. You are there to grow and get better. You got to maximize and be efficient, be professional with it, but you're there to grow and learn. But the second you leave training, you go operational, right? SEAL teams, they do a workup, right? 6, 8 months, depending on the mission, they do different, specific training ops. They rotate through it. They do a workup before they go operational. Well, for good men, good people, like the second you leave training, right? So you come to training, that is your workup. That's your training time. You got to fucking get better. And like I said, if you have a half an hour or you got 3 hours, you better maximize that shit. Because the second you walk out the door, you're operational again. Because now you're on the street. Now you're with your family. I was at my daughter's Christmas concert tonight and stuff. You're operational. You're out living life. This is if you run across those predators that are willing to hurt you and your family, that's what's going to happen. So now you were in your operational environment. So if something happens in real world situation, real time, you don't have 10, 12, 20 minutes to stage and get into an optimal state. You have to do what's called a combat stage, meaning how do you go from life, what we call condition yellow, threat-based perception of the world, right? But doesn't mean you have a threat, your radar is on, and then all of a sudden, threat. And you got to get to a peak state, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I think a lot of people believe that, when the threat is there, I just respond. And it's like, no, you don't. That's like saying, listen, I've skied for 30 years. If one day I happen to take a chairlift and got to the top of a hill and suddenly realized it's the Olympics and I'm standing at the top, fuck it, I'll take a run at it. I can just snap into some peak performance state and fucking go down the hill and set some personal bests or some shit like that. Like athletes get it, top performers get it. They work. Like I always use the analogy when I'm teaching staging that I love when they interview Olympic athletes after the Olympics. If the guys or girls podiumed, they've got their medal and they say, what are you guys going to do now? And I love it because I saw this one guy and his response was like, you know what I want? You know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to go home and I'm going to reconnect with all the people that love me, my parents, my friends, because for the last 4 years, I have gone to no birthday parties, not mine, not theirs. I don't celebrate Christmas. I don't celebrate holidays. I'm not there for these things. I don't go out and see movies. I'm not going out eating. People don't understand, but for the last 4 years, I have been eat, sleep, and shit what I'm doing, right? To have this opportunity so that when the day comes, when they are, when it's their turn, they don't fucking blow it. And it's like, people don't understand that it's like hitting peak state, snapping into or clicking into this state where you're going to perform at your peak is no joke. And yet most people go, well, when I'm training for self-defense, and what are you training? Well, I'm learning. We start every with a 15-20 minute warm-up. 20, like, to do what? Oh, just to make sure our body's loose, and then we start our training. It's, to me, it's ridiculous. Pros don't train that way, like, especially when you're talking life and death. You're not talking like, I didn't podium, which would be tragic after the time you put in, but you're talking life and death. So I want people to understand that when you teach people staging, and it's like a muscle and they practice it and they get good at it so that every time they come in, they can start clicking in quicker and quicker, right? They got that, the body, their mind, everything understands it. When they're out in the real world, they can adapt that and they can develop what's called a combat stage, right? And so then they can activate that, and no matter what, they can go from life, condition yellow, to condition red, which is clicked in ozone, optimal zone of natural excellence, in as fast as you can blink. And that's what you want, right? If my family's life on the line, I don't want to be close to my peak. I want to be peak. I don't want to be close to my ozone. I don't want to be close to the flow experience. I need to be clicked in, snapped in, right in flow state, right in the peak experience, like right in the peak performance state. And so that happens by having a process, by having a routine, right? Is there anything on that you want to add in to reinforce that, Brad?
Yeah, you know what? There's a couple things that I've just been kind of taking note of from points that like really resonate with me. And like at the end of the day, is if you're warming up versus staging, like you said it earlier, is like no professional warms up. It's not good enough. You like if you are merely just warming up, you're a recreationalist. It's an amateur mindset, and when the stakes are the absolute highest, like our lives and the lives of our family are on the line, it's like, why not take it serious? Like,
Yeah.
we've had people that are like, well, I just don't stretch and I just don't warm up. And it's like, like I actually started, as you're talking about, I'm like, I started to kind of get angry when I reflect back about like some of people that are like, nah, I just don't really do that. It's like, well, you're here to learn how to protect against violence. Why would you not? Like, this is, we told you, like, this is one of the things that you got to do. Well, I don't need to do that. Well, it's like, well, tie up, thumb and eyes under pressure wins fights. Yeah, but I don't need to do that. It's like, no, that's all part of the process. It's all the building blocks to defend against violence. So it kind of like, I was like, motherfucker, like I was kind of thinking about that. Like, why would you just stand there and watch everybody else stage? Because
Yeah.
like you're not taking it serious. So there is that differentiator between amateur and professional. And then
Yeah.
like, we talked about, you mentioned ozone, and you know, if you don't, how do you know what your ozone is? If you're not building the process, if you're not being able to click in when you have time, when you're doing your dedicated training, when you're coming in and working the process, and you're like, fuck, like this is my ozone, and you refine it, it gets better, you put more legs underneath the table. So when you are conditioning and you're crossing that over to a combat stage, you actually have a fucking baseline. You have something to go off of, as opposed to like, yeah, well, in the moment of crisis, Superman's just going to show up. No,
Yeah.
he's not going to show up because you didn't train him to show up. You didn't can bring that out, right? So, those are some points that I really really liked. I had one that just kind of jumped out of my brain. Um, yeah, here's what it was. Like we obviously put a ton of work into staging. What I think the best part of it is when you do come for dedicated training and you're dragging your fucking ass, or you had a hard day, or you had, you got something in your head, or whatever it is. It's like, perfect. Because what do you actually get to work? You get to work the process to shift your state from dragging your butt. Maybe you come in late, you get stuck in traffic, and all this shit's happening, and you're trying to get to training, and you just your mind's racing. It's like perfect. Now you actually get to work it. It's way different to be like, I feel good, 100%. I'm gonna go train, dedicated training. This go do my protocol, my session. It's like, yeah, but the stage is very easy when you feel great, right? But when you when you got to shift your state, you actually have to work the process. That's where you're going to get tons of juice, tons of juice.
Yeah, you're 100%. And we say it all the time that you have to go from where you're at to where you need to be. And that's exactly what you just said. You know, I love it when people come in and they're fucking tired. I was up all night. Or we have a newborn and they're up all night. And I only got 2 hours sleep. Work was shit. I'm distracted. I'm thinking this. Perfect. Because if that's the state you were in, where you're at right now, is when you get attacked and your family needs you, you need to go from where you're at to where you fucking need to be. And can you do that? Because that shit doesn't happen accidentally. And amateurs react, professionals respond or take action. So if you think that the second a threat's in front of you, somebody threatening you, is going to cause you to react into a perfect state of peak performance, you're a fucking idiot. It doesn't happen that way, right? Unless you've got some previous training where you've built these neuroassociative responses, not reactions. Because again, amateurs react. Professionals don't react. They respond. So if you've built the system, then yes, the stimulus activates the response. But people haven't done that, because the other thing that again causes us frustration is I've heard people talk about this type of stuff. Oh, peak performance, peak states, all this type of stuff, but they talk and don't do. Then you go do. I remember training back in the day with this guy who, again, talking so much about psychology and combat physiology and all this type of stuff. So I went and I was doing some training with him, and all the talk was great, and all the doing was non-existent. They didn't do anything. You talked. You're just saying shit, but you didn't actually have a tangible physical process for how you build this. Right? Even now, what are we doing? We're trying to get people, like, instead of, like, I'm going to share it. The 3 steps are simple. I'm going to share it with people. But the talk is easy, but the work is hard. And people don't have a tangible physical thing that they can do, mental thing that they can do, and then make that part of your routine. One other thing I got from what you were saying that I would share with people, and this is kind of step number 1. When we train, man, you have a good time. You have fun. That's no problem. But when you first show up, that is not the time for chit chat. That is not the time to have fun. That's not the time for fucking around. That's not the time to go, oh, this is the first time I've sat down, or this is the first thing I'm doing for myself all day. I just got to relax a bit. The mind must precede the body. If you're going into battle, the mind must precede the body. If you're not right in your head, you are at risk downrange. So you have got to get your shit right. So when people come in, I don't like talking. That's not the time to talk, because you're not in state. Once you're in state, you can joke and talk and laugh and do what you want, because guess what? When people are clicked in and now they're in work mode, they punch in and it's time to go to work, the conversations, the jokes, the laughing, all of the stuff that might come with it is all on what? It's all combat orientated. It's all actually helping us, because again, that's part of the state. It keeps people loose, and it's all about growth and development. It's not random shit. When you're done and you switch to operational mode, then you can sit around and talk and shoot the shit and do whatever you want to do, because you've now switched into operational mindset, right? And so you're back to kind of condition yellow. But training is condition orange, condition red. You've got to cycle up. So when people come in, you have to force them to be like, wherever you came from, you are here now. So click in, stage, work the process. And like you said, the further you are away from where you need to be, the better. Because now you actually have to work this shit and change, and it changes you physically, mentally, emotionally, biochemically. It creates the change. Right? So anyways, okay, I think we've set it up enough. Let's jump into this and give people the 3 steps. Okay. Step number 1, when you first come into training, should always be, in my opinion, centering. Okay, now what is centering? Centering is where you fucking clear your mind. This might seem easy, but you center, you clear your mind, meaning you have got to be in that moment. And I guarantee that for most people, all day long, they are everywhere but in the moment. And I don't know if a lot of people even really know what being in the moment is. But being in the moment is when they're literally, even though the world is still turning and all this shit is happening, nothing exists outside of the four walls that surround you when you're training. Just literally in that moment. And that means all secondary thought is being pushed out of the theater of your mind. And I'm going to let you share your perceptions of centering in a second. I'm going to add two things with it. We haven't talked yet about the best way to do that, but I just want people to understand what centering is. And I'll share with you the way Paul told it to me. If you can't, in a life and death situation, if you can't quiet your mind, if you can't quiet and regulate and take control of your internal dialogue, of the internal imaging that is happening in the theater of your mind, if you can't be in the moment and still and quiet your mind, you will die. And I was like, what? He goes, put it this way. Most people, if you said, put them in a room, quiet room, sensory deprivation, shut off the lights, right? Noise canceling headphones, just had them in, room temperature so their body's comfortable, they're relaxed. Most people cannot control their mind. They can't still their mind. As a matter of fact, when you start to use sensory deprivation, which is why I love float tanks and things like that, most people literally hate it because they go fucking insane. Their mind is screaming and racing and unwanted and intrusive thoughts. I always think of it like being in a glass room, and it's like and like with like opaque glass where the sun is shining through, right? But the glass is opaque. But it's these shadows. And you're trying to just sit there calm and still, and these shadows keep bursting in through the room and keep obscuring the light coming through. You know what I mean? These unwanted, distracting thoughts. And he's like, most people can't quiet their mind in a perfectly quiet environment. And yet they expect that when you got somebody beating the ever-loving fuck out of you, or stabbing you, or brutally assaulting your family, that in that crisis, they're going to quiet their mind and actually be able to hear and execute on mission demands and mission commands. And it's like, you don't develop a still mind when somebody is snapping their fist off your face. It's not where it happens. So number one thing is learning to, in a matter of 2 to 5 minutes, completely centering your mind. And there's people that study yoga and study breathing and study all these things for an entire lifetime trying to achieve a still mind. One of the greatest gifts that combat has, and therefore combat training, weaponized training, is it demands that you're in the moment. You're not facing two guys even in training and sparring that are coming at you full contact with sticks, or you know what I mean, or shock knives or sim guns, and you're thinking about, geez, after this I got to remember to stop by the store and get picked up that milk on the way home. You're not distracted like that. There is no room for distracting secondary noise. But most people never practice how to stage and clear their mind on demand. Not so that it has to be stimulus response or stimulus reaction, but purposeful. So number one thing is centering, and then Brad, I'll let you throw your 2 cents down on it, and or even let us in on how we do that.
Yeah, just my quick 2 cents, and there's a word that like I use for it, and I feel like it's like having a cleanse. You're cleansing away all the stuff. You're washing and you're cleansing that, like, the distractions away, right? So for me, I think of it like that way. It's like, okay, like there's all this stuff and all, like, everybody's life is busy and blah blah blah, and I say, well, how do you get rid of it? How do you cleanse it away for the what's in front of you, right? And yeah, like what we, in terms of the process, is we need to focus on our breath. We take a designated period of time. We like to say 2 minutes, but we've done this for way longer, right? You want to get to like a 2-minute point of time where you could center within that period of time. So like when you're doing that, like obviously, like I said, it could take longer at the beginning, right? I know for me, sometimes it takes me 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Just doing 4 count breathing. Breathing in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And repeating that process over and over and over, and just cleansing and washing away those thoughts and just centering and just trying to wipe everything out. And it again, it's like you said, there's people that spend a lifetime trying to still their mind and do that. So for us, it's the process that if you're going to build a foundation on top of that, and you don't have a clean foundation, it's all stuff's all over the place. What you're going to stack on top of that is going to be inadequate, right? So if we like the next steps that we talk about, if you didn't center and you're still over here and you're still over there and you're going to move to these next steps, like it's inadequate.
Yeah.
You're not going to get ever to your ozone without wiping and being able to just be in that moment, right? So
Yeah, 100%. You water down every other step if you can't center and put yourself into the moment and still your mind, right? And a couple things that went with that is the box breathing, the autogenic breathing. Why this is so important and why we do the 4 count breath, like Brad talked about, is because that type of breath pattern. There's other types of breath patterns that people can use. We call that combat breathing, but it takes the central nervous system, takes the autonomic part of our central nervous system, respiratory, heart rate, blood pressure, and it pulls it over to the somatic part, the part that we can control, right? So there's the autonomic and there's the somatic part of the nervous system, and box breathing helps us to take control of our autonomic responses. Okay, so when you're doing that and you're focused in on that deep breath work, you can just focus in on breath and clear all of your thoughts. And it's such a powerful link. And we often say that, everybody breathes, right? Or you wouldn't be here, but not everybody uses breath. And I mean, I don't know what else I can say to that. We could just talk hours on breath work alone, and we will probably dedicate a podcast to breath work, but that is such an important piece of this puzzle. Okay. And again, every time that you begin training, and here's the thing, I do this breathing. I set my alarm and 3, 4, 5 times a day and at different stages in my life. It's not like I do it every day, but there's times when I know I need it. And I set my alarm that goes off 5, 6 times a day. And I do what's called an observe and report, meaning that when you're busy and you're stressed and life's going on, the alarm will go off and it reminds me, and I'll take 60 seconds, I'll take 2 minutes, and I do my autogenic breathing and I clear my mind and I center my mind. Because it's like, listen, you're like a tuning fork. So if you just go out in your day and shit's hitting you all day long as you're living your life, right? Life's going to throw shit at you. Well, life hits that tuning fork and sets your frequency. It sets how you're feeling, the feelings become a thought, which impacts your actions, right? That's the human system. Feel, think, do. So, if you're not in control of that, then the world and all the shit and all the negativity and all the other crap that's going on is hitting you and setting your frequency. It controls your thought, your feelings, your thoughts, and your actions. So what I do is you stop, you breathe, you center, you clear. Then I check in with myself. How am I feeling? Where am I at? Am I in the state I want? Offensive mindset, front focused, powerful. You know what I mean? All of these different types of things. So the centering is the step one. And when you see people walk in, there's no talking, there's no bullshit. You're coming from somewhere out there, but now you're fucking here. And here is purposeful. Here is how you train and prepare and weaponize to protect. So go from wherever you're coming from, get where you need to be, and do it quick. And so breathe, center, clear your mind. That's step number one. Box breathing, autogenic breathing is how we work that. I'll just make a side note. Nowadays, you see it everywhere. Fucking open up your TikTok or wherever, and you see everybody doing cold plunges. Well, one of the things with the cold plunge, think about all the myriad of health benefits that come from cold plunging, right? Cold showers, all that type of stuff. Your mitochondria, all this different stuff. But every time you see somebody drop into that cold plunge, what do you see them having to do first and foremost? Regulate their fucking breath, right? The Will Hoff method, regulate your fucking breath. They got to center and clear their mind. If you see people when they jump in that ice water, man, when people get into that, and you see when they're losing control of their mind, you see when those shadows and those voices and those distracting thoughts come flooding in because they don't make it. They can't fucking last. Right? Because they can't just get centered and still. And the ones that are the best or that are very successful, they control their breathing, right? Because that ice water, that contrast is again hitting the autonomic nervous system, respiratory, heart rate, blood pressure, all of that starts to cascade up and go out of control. And if you can't, then your feelings become your thoughts and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so breath work is powerful, but you also got to build out a theater of the mind and learn how to control so that nothing enters your space in that moment and you actually have a still mind. Okay, so that's number one. Once we've achieved this, now again, I'm just going to repeat. This is why in the beginning we say 2 to 5 minutes. Well, that's what you want to work to. Sometimes it takes you 10, 15 minutes. I've been doing this for 30 years. You get into this stuff, and there's days when I'm stressed and distracted, and we just go through different health things. My mom, diagnosed with ALS, and we just went through a thing with my daughter, and you got to go brain scans and all this other shit. It's stress, but life keeps going on. But it's like if you don't fucking regulate it, if you can't in those moments, if you can't still your mind, it destroys you. And I've seen it. I see it in the people around me that don't and can't do it. And anxiety starts to create a whole bunch of shit in their world. So it's a life thing, right? But you want to get good to where a few repetitions, they know scientifically that if you do 3 repetitions of 4-count breathing, you take control of the autonomic and bring it to the somatic. But you got to practice that. Okay, so once you're centered, got a clear mind, step number 2 is where we start now to enter into the ozone. Center, clear, and the next is we connect. And so connecting is 2 pieces. The first piece with connecting is we connect with our identity. And then the second piece is we connect with our why. Okay, so we connect with our identity. Brad, I'll let you jump in first with what that means to you. You don't have to share your specific process if you don't want to, but why do we connect with our identity? Why is that step number 1 in the second phase is to go into our identity?
Yeah, after centering, I think of it in terms of connecting as like, well, now that I'm have this slate clean, what kind of fuel am I putting in? Right. So for me, when I think of identity, it's like, well, what am I bringing to the table to give me the maximum amount of fuel? Because the more fuel, and maybe it's not the maximum amount of fuel, but the high octane, right? You said nitrous at the beginning, right? How are we not putting just like the bottom of the barrel, 87 octane or whatever, where you're it's not high performance, but what is that? And this just as centering, this is work, right? Your identity is things that you need to question, things that you need to grow and expand and ultimately build. You have to build that identity, and especially when it comes to weaponizing and to violence. It's like, well, what kind for me, it's like, well, what kind of man are you? Where's your line in the stand? Like, what are you going to do to protect your family and your loved ones? What type of person am I to stand up and answer the call? So connecting to my identity reinforces, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, it makes it all on me, right? The responsibility for the safety of myself, my family, right? So the identity, and then the second piece is your why, right? Connecting to your why. So this is who I am, and now this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Whether that's from my own experiences, or I could use other people's experiences too. Like, we have one that we've used and I use a lot, is never again, right? Never again. Never am I going to be victimized and beaten from inches of my life. I've never actually had that physically in my life, but I could still use that experience and take it on as my own to give me that high octane fuel that I was talking about, as opposed to me like, yeah, I just don't really want to get beat up. It's way different. And we've taught, and we could do a whole other podcast on this. Yeah. Well, words have power, right? So if words have power, how do we take the most powerful words and connect with our identity and our why to give us the absolute highest octane fuel that is going to bring us into our ozone, as opposed to just the zone of mediocrity, right?
Yeah, I love it. My things, I would go off identity too. When you connect, when you're centered and your mind's clear, you got a still mind. The first thing that I want to put into that room, the first thing that I'm going to allow into that room by design, not reactive, but by design, okay, is my identity, because I say this all the time. This is probably one of my strongest quotes, but you cannot, at least for long, outrun or outperform who you believe yourself to be. If people, most people, do not understand how much you have to work on your identity, who you actually fucking believe yourself to be, they really underestimate that part. I call it the warrior shift, or the identity shift, right? I struggle with this. Like, when I started this, like most people when they start this, how do you see yourself as a fucking warrior? Like, really, like, no ego talk. How do you see yourself as a warrior? I meet people all the fucking time, right, doing this stuff. And I see a lot of men sit in front of me, and they oh yeah, man, I know I do this and I know I do that. And it's like, listen, I truly think that you think you will, but you don't know. You don't know whether you will or not. You've never been in the situation. You've never been in the pressure cooker. You've never been tested. You've never been confronted like that. And look at the study, right? Men overestimate by 4,000% their fighting capability. 4,000%. That's fucking insane. So listen, if everybody that sat in front of me said, no, man, I'm not worried about my mindset. I'm not worried about me. I would fucking do it. I just could use a few tips and tricks. Oh, really? What training have you ever done? No, I've never needed to. Just, I guess I'm lucky this way. That's very few people. Very, very, very few people. And I was one of those people. I didn't know. I had to really step in and go, like, who do you see yourself, right? No bullshit. And if I was honest, I didn't see myself as a protector. I saw other guys and thought, now, look at those guys. That's a badass. That guy's tough. That guy's this. That guy's switched on. You meet these tier 1 guys, you go, those are where I'm not those guys. And it's like, you can't have that. You actually have to create an identity shift, right? You actually have to have that fucking happen, because you can't outrun or perform who you truly believe yourself to be. And when you just talk bullshit, your internal, your subconscious knows whether you're full of shit or not. So yeah. you can't consciously just, you can't posture with yourself. Who are you
trying to convince? You're yourself.
Yeah, and that's what I get a lot of people. Who are you trying to convince? I hear you talking like you're trying to convince me, but really you're just trying to convince yourself. Because the guys that are switched on in warriors, they don't say shit like that. They don't talk like that. They don't sit there trying to tell the whole world and convince everybody around them that they're badasses. They don't fucking talk like that because they don't need to. Because deep down, they know who the fuck they are. And so you never hear that bullshit. They don't operate from ego like that. So the second I hear it, I know you're full of shit. Right? So you have to actually have a process for how you create the identity shift. And training does that, because it challenges you on all of your different beliefs. Most people don't even know what the belief systems are. Right? They don't know that there's actually global beliefs and specific beliefs and personal beliefs. They don't even understand the difference between the three, and they've never actually gone deep enough to figure out what they actually think about them fucking selves. Like, for real. Cut the shit. And that's a process that you can walk people through. So where we need to be is on our identity. We have done this work. This is why you're learning the staging process. Because like you said, words have power. Words create emotional stimulus in us. They create emotional states in us. And one word that fucking gives me, like you talked about, Brad, the highest octane fuel from just one word, because it fucking means something to me on an emotional level, might not do the same for you. You don't get as much juice out of that squeeze. But you have a different word. So you got to create and understand and explore and challenge who you actually believe yourself to be. Because if you're going to be a warrior and a protector and at a professional fucking level, you need to have an identity shift. Warriors aren't born, they're trained. Every single day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, and it's passed down. That training is passed down from warrior to warrior. That's how the process works. And then when you start to shape that identity, then you start understanding how you can enact that, how you can use words and phrases called I am statements, where you start saying these I am statements, but these aren't fucking words, just meaningless fucking posturing, conscious banter. These words are deeply rooted in your subconscious, and they invoke powerful fucking emotional states. And your emotions become your thoughts, and your emotions and your thoughts impact your actions. So imagine what happens when you've done the work and you center and clear your mind using the power of breath. And then all of a sudden, you know the words like a fucking spell. I mean, these words conjure these powerful emotional fucking states that move you to the emotional fuel, the mental and physical fuel of a man of conviction. Because conviction is what causes action. And a belief or an opinion doesn't give you the power to act. Conviction does. And now these words create this state. And now you're locked in and connected to that identity. And then from identity, your why comes up. Why are you fucking doing this? And whether that's family, or whether that's the deep fucking belief in your right to life and not have some fucking piece of shit, deprive you of that life or the freedom to protect that life, that is powerful shit when it is beliefs of conviction. But most people, again, do you know what you believe? Of course I know what I believe. Here's a pen and paper. Write down your top 10 beliefs in order. Highest to lowest. Go. Most people can't do that. They can't do that if you give them 5 fucking hours, never mind 5 days, never mind 5 seconds. But when you have people that have worked this process, have created the identity shift, have the words that invoke powerful fucking emotional states because they're predicated off beliefs and neuroassociations that create physiological, mental, and emotional acts of conviction, holy fuck. And now every time someone comes into training, how do you start training without doing this? Oh, I'm going to stretch my calves. It's like if you're listening to this and you don't, I don't know how this doesn't make sense, and hopefully it does. But you center, you connect identity and your why. And then you go to the third step. Now, how long does this take? 2 to 5 minutes connecting, 2 to 5 minutes centering, 2 to 5 minutes connecting, and then we move to step 3. Now here's the thing, you work to that. You do not move off of centering until you are centered. I've had guys come in and their entire battle, they're there, I got 45 minutes. Their entire 45-minute training session is them trying to clear their mind. And sometimes that's exactly the fight you needed. And people think, what a waste of time. Was it? What is Sun Tzu, Art of War, right? The greatest enemy, the toughest enemy is the enemy within, not the external enemy. If you know the enemy within and you can defeat that enemy, then no other enemy outside stands a chance. Of course, I'm paraphrasing because that was not exactly what he said, but you get what I mean. You have to fucking take control of the only thing you can fucking control, which is you. Some motherfucker, some low-life piece of shit wants to come at you and your fucking family. Your shit better be right internally. You better have your head on straight. You better know the man that stares back at you every morning in the fucking mirror. And it better not be predicated off ego and I think I know him, right? And wearing all these masks of whatever you want to project to the world, you better fucking know. And that's what a real warrior process does for you. And it never lets you cheat that, never lets you run away from that. Training holds up the mirror. And a lot of times when we look in the mirror and we see dark fucking parts of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge, it will not let you look away from that shit. It forces you to work through it. Right? So you center. So 2 to 5 minutes is gold standard shit. But it is the process. There's lots of days that I fail at the process. Because if your standard's high enough and you demand certain things, there's no way you're going to possibly make it every single time. But I never quit the process. I always work the process because the process fucking works. And at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, rubber meets the road, the process will be there for you. Not by accident, but by fucking design and by intent. Okay? So we go staging, we go connecting, and the third step is what we call zeroing. Now, zeroing comes from the same way if you took a rifle out, you had a gun you haven't shot in a while or a gun you've never shot before, you're going to want to take that gun to the range, you're going to want to zero the sights, right? You're going to zero it in. Make sure, say, boom, pull the trigger. Hey, I'm a little high and left, adjust my sights, adjust whatever. You're going to zero that gun in until you got it hitting accurate. So zeroing for us is now where we make the shift into the physical portion of this. Everything up to so far, the centering and then the connecting has been mental work. It has an impact on us physically and biochemically and emotionally, but it's been mental work. Now you're coming out of, you're still using the theater of the mind, but now you're bridging the physical into it. So here's the big thing. There's 3 steps within step 3 of zeroing. Zero in your body. So step number 1 is make ready. Step number 2, action. Step number 3, recovery, or AAR, after action review. So real quick, I'll throw a couple downrange, Brad, and then I'll let you fill in yours on it too. The second I start to say, okay, now I centered and I'm connected, identity and why. Now I'm starting moving my body. And I've created a routine. I've created a process. Most hockey players, if you go and ask them what skate they put on first, ask them what shin guard they put on first, right? It's this, superstition, routine. It's just like, if they don't put their right skate on first, or if they don't put their left one on first, that the skates don't feel right. There's a way they tie them. There's a way they tape their stick. Warriors kind of, for the most part, the guys I've met have some routines. They have some superstition, you know what I mean? And so for me, when I go through and prep my body, I'm systematic about it. So I often think about my kill chain. I often think about my strategies, tactics, and tools. And I often follow my kill chain, meaning that if I ended up in long range and how I might work my Trojan horse, my flashbangs, moving to my smash and grab into my avalanche sequence, and the different strategies and tactics within that, I literally have a part of the body and I start making sure that that is zeroed in. So people might say, oh, so that's when you do your stretching. That's when you start loosening up your wrists, or you start, making sure your quads are loose, or whatever it is. Yes, but it's a combination. I think I take whatever body part I'm zeroing in. Let's just say you're taking your forearms, right? Loosening up the wrists, whatever. But then I think about it strategically and tactically. How am I going to use that limb? Right? Like when you shoot that gun and you're looking to get it dead center, you're looking to zero it, it's because you plan on shooting something. Whether you're hunting or shooting at targets, or whether you're using it in warfare, you're planning on shooting something. So when I think about using my wrists or using my legs, quads, knees, head, whatever it is, I'm loosening up my neck, I'm thinking about my neck needs to be prepped for impact off an unassisted headbutt, off an eye shot, off a knee, off swinging a stick, off stroking patterns with the knives, whatever it happens to be. So now what you're doing is, yes, you might stretch that body, but the entire time that I'm loosening or stretching that muscle or warming it up, I am running imagery in the theater of my mind of me executing that tool. Does that make sense? So it's like make ready means to make ready mentally first. I see myself executing the action. I'm stretching my arms out to fire this eye shot. So as I'm stretching and feel the muscles, I'm connecting on a kinesthetic level. How does that muscle feel? Does it feel loose? Does it feel relaxed? Does it feel ballistic? Is it ready? But in my mind, I'm seeing myself execute that motion. Boom, I'm seeing that. And not only am I imaging myself doing that, I'm using something which a tactical arousal control technique called cue imaging. I'm overlaying a symbolism of how I want that to feel, to how I want that to be executed, which might be like pulling the trigger on a double barrel shotgun. So I'm not just seeing myself throw an eye shot. I'm not just physically feeling the muscle. The muscle is going to serve a purpose. Like the rifle is going to serve a purpose. You're zeroing it in and you're thinking about, I'm going to need this to execute whatever action. So making ready is a combination of imaging, the strategic and tactical application, while prepping the muscle, right? So while actually you're seeing yourself prepping the body, seeing that connectedness, and then using cue imaging so that you get the right emotional content. Because those things have to be married together. And so I make ready. So I'm stretching, you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm running the imagery in the theater of my mind. I'm connecting it to the proper cue imaging. And when I feel that click in, I feel like, okay, I've got it. Then I go from make ready to action. And then I execute. Boom. And then I fire it. I pull the trigger on whatever it is I'm doing. It doesn't have to be full power. It doesn't have to be fast. Most times it's not. But you actually then go through the motion. And so I might, let's say I do 3 or 4 knees. Right? You do a couple shrimps, whatever, depending on what I'm actually zeroing in, I go to action. And then I stop. Just like you see people, they throw a couple knees and then I stop. Because why? I go to recovery, right? So you do 5 or 6 reps of it and then I AAR it. Meaning what? You do an after action review. How did it feel? Then is when my brain can go and focus on the details. My hip felt a little tight. My hamstring felt a little tight. My ankles feel a little bit tight. My shoulder's really cool right now. I feel a real kink in my neck. So now I'm getting feedback. And that feedback then allows you to course correct. So then I go back to making ready. So I've made a note. Oh, my neck's tight. I got a kink. I got a really tight muscle here. So then I go back to making ready. So then the whole time I might be working my neck. I might even take out the roller or the ball and I'm working my neck loose. But why am I loosening my neck? I'm thinking and imaging I'm going to need that loose for when I snap in that headbutt. I'm going to need that loose if somebody gets a hold of the neck and starts cranking on it, if we're on the ground or something like that. And so the whole time I'm physically working the body, warming the body, but I am constantly in the theater of my mind and making sure that the right imagery, the strategic and tactical connections are being made with the cue imaging. And so, I mean, it's deep work, which a lot of people go, this sounds like a lot of work and effort. Yeah, professional training often is. It's just one of those things, right? That if you really actually want to do something at more than a recreational, mediocre level, and you're actually working with people that have really fucking high standards, geez, and maybe we should have high standards when it comes to you telling me that what your whole mission is to keep your family safe when some fucking group of fucking violent predators repeat fucking history of violent offenses, drug addiction, and fucking mental health problems, and these fuckers come at you with no moral code and no fear of legal repercussions. Yeah. It's not 7-Eleven self-defense. If you want fucking real world skill sets, because here's the thing, I don't want to survive something like that. I want to fucking thrive. I didn't start this and I don't do this to be mediocre at this. I do this because my family, that's how much they matter to me. That's how much my right to life matters. Nothing matters as much as your life, because if you don't have your life, you don't have fucking shit. So this process of zeroing in is the final stage. And when people, and then we have a very simple thing. People center, people connect, and then people start zeroing. And you see them systematically, like fucking pros, going through and prepping their body. Make ready, action, recover AAR, get biofeedback, and keep going on the process. And then all of a sudden what you hear is people chiming out like fucking good to go, good to go, good to go. And when someone says good to go, you look over at them and they're in a fucking zone. And when you got 3, 4 guys, 5 guys, 10 guys in a room, like our inner circle guys, you come out on a Sunday, nobody walks in fucking talking and fucking around. They come from life, different spots. Burnt out, tired, ready, energized, whatever it is. They come in and everybody starts centering. You see them breathing, you see them clearing their mind, you see them fucking getting centered in the moment. And then you see that guy and that guy and that guy switch to connecting, and you see the identity and them connecting with their why. And you see their physiology change before your eyes. Then you see them start fucking zeroing their body in and start prepping. And you see them running the theater of their mind and running the right, strategies and tactics and warming the body and taking a second and AARing it. And very purposefully and methodically and purposefully, right, just fucking prepping their body. And all of a sudden you hear these guys going, good to go, good to go, good to go. And then start training. What do you think your training is going to be like after that process? If you had an hour, if you have an hour and in 10 to 15 minutes, you got what are quote unquote regular Joes, regular people walking in, and they've been taught this system, work this system, and they fucking stage. And so now you've only got 45 minutes left. Well, that 45 minutes is some of the highest quality fucking training that you'll ever fucking see or be around. Because it is not quantity, it is quality. And then the only thing that surpasses that is when you have quality plus fucking quantity. Now you can drive those guys for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Remember, Brad, I'm going to let you jump in on this and go through your zeroing and all this stuff. But the thing that I want to get at is when we train, right, and we don't start people this way. People start with 1 hour intensives, 16 1-hour weekly intensives. They don't start with prolonged intensive training because they don't have the focus, they don't have the mindset, they don't have the skill sets to handle it. When we do 6 8-hour training blocks with guys that have been doing this for 15, 20 years, people that as they start to bridge into that world are often shocked because you hear guys, hey, when do we take a lunch? Hey, can I stop and get a snack? And everybody in the room is like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, man, you got to be able to go 6, 7, 8 hours. You don't need fucking food. You don't need it. When you're in the state, when you're in that ozone, you don't need that shit, and it feels like you've been training for an hour. Like you got to be able to fucking have some grit. You got to be able to, like, most people fucking fall to pieces when they get a little bit hungry, right? When they get a little bit tired of something, it's like, it's dude, like, what level do you want to go to this at? That's, there's levels in everything. And what level do you want to go to? Sorry, Brad, there's my tangent. Off you go.
Yeah, I was. You know what? I think that in terms of the
Can't hear you, buddy. I think you're muted.
no, it shouldn't be. I'm not muted.
Or, no, sorry, Brad, you're good. My headset, it's happened again. I'm a hand talker and I nailed my headset. There you go.
Yeah. So can you hear me? Good.
You keep talking. I can't hear you. It's probably mine.
Testing.
Yeah, I'm good, buddy. Go ahead.
Okay. I think in terms of the process for zeroing, you nailed it, obviously. And I don't need to go through and I think there's one part that I would like to talk about with it, because when we do zero, we talked at the beginning. It's like, well, what's your ozone? Your optimal zone of natural excellence. So when you're zeroing in those tools, whatever it is, the tools you live and die by, and you're going through and you're making ready and you're executing on the action and you're doing your AAR, part of the AAR process is like, was that my ozone? Was that the best elbow that I could do, right? Was that the best knee? Was that the best, Trojan horse? Was that the best tool that I'm zeroing in that moment? And if I review it, I'm like, nah, it wasn't. Why? Because this is tight or that's tight. Okay, well, let's work that. Then let's go back. Let's make it ready. Let's execute it. And then it's like, were you in the ozone? Was that your baseline? Was that clicked in? And if it's yes, it's like, okay, now I'm gonna go dial in the next thing that I need to dial in, right? Because we talked about earlier, it's like, if you don't know what your ozone is and you're not conditioning and growing your peak performance, then how the fuck do you know, right? The other side of things with that is this, is like, were you in your ozone? Were you dialed in? Were you clicked in? Were you ready to go? And if the answer is no, then why are you starting to train?
Yep.
So many times what happens is people take half a training session to be like, now my elbows are good, or now my knees are good. Now that feels good. And it's like, yeah, but what were you doing for the first 30 minutes? You weren't operating on your peak performance. You might as well take that work, do it on the front end, make sure that, like the centering to the connecting to the zeroing, it's all stacking those layers to reach that peak performance, reach your optimum zone of natural excellence. And then when you're there and that feels right, and then you go and train, you're setting yourself up for so much more quality. Yeah. The other thing is this, real quick, like I'm just going to use an elbow for an example. Let's say that that's what you're focusing on during that session, or that's part of it. And you're like, holy shit, I just reached a new level. I actually, because I was clicked into my ozone on this is the best that it is. This is my best. And then you do something, you're like, I just broke that. Maybe that was a piece of, imagery or tactical self-talk or emotional content that brought that to the next level. But if you weren't at your best before you started to train, you're never going to break through that, right?
Yeah.
So I think just for me, it was just really clicking into the ozone for the zeroing aspect of it, and then pushing into development.
Yeah, 100%. And what you said too is an exact great representation of the body preceding the mind, right? People they come in and they start moving, and like you say, they're 70% through their training, and now they click in. Now they start feeling good, and that's because you're letting your body. That's because you're warming up. You're letting your body precede the mind. The body knows what the mind fucking tells it. The mind has to precede the body. And so you have to create this routine, this process, which is the staging process. And again, hopefully what we're sharing with people is that when you do this and you work this in your training, and that's demanded of you every single time, and you work that process because the process works, then all of a sudden when you're out in real world, you figure out how to do a combat stage. How do you get there? Because like there's a whole other things. We build in physical triggers. Right, you can build yourself when you create this process and you're going through the state. You could tap yourself on the leg, or you could snap fingers, or you could Do whatever you want to do. There's little motions that you can do that create neuroassociated triggers. So then all of a sudden it's like you can literally snap your fingers, you hit your trigger button, and it automatically clicks you to that state. It's kind of like self-hypnosis is a lot of stuff that we've studied and has been incorporated into this and stuff like that, because again, it's like, they can give a command and it activates the subconscious. Self-hypnosis isn't like, oh, get up and cluck like you think you're a fucking chicken. Like, there's ways to program the subconscious and to create neuroassociated states, and so that's what you're doing. So then you can fire or trigger this neuroassociative, state, or this ozone in SWAT and different things like that. A lot of SWAT commanders are smart because as guys are getting ready and they're prepping and maybe prepping the stack or whatever, they'll use physical touch. They'll check their gear. They'll pull on their gear and tap on the shoulder, do whatever. But they've done that every time in training, and so they just adjust the guy's gear. You know what I mean? Put their hand in a certain spot, hit him, and give him a little pull or tug, or that hand on the back of the shoulder in the stack or whatever it is. And the second you feel that hand, like your whole physiology, your whole state switches, and it's like fucking good to go, green light. Like, let's do this. And then you're ready to punch in and go to work. We use that piece of terminology. It's punch in and go to work. That's why people say, good to go. Like, you sound off when you are ready to punch in and go to work. But that's a prep. And then we have preps. We have guys that use staging when they get in their car to come to training. They start the centering process. They start the connecting process. And so they show up and walk in and they're already fucking in state. They do a little bit of zeroing and fucking good to go. Let's punch in and go to work. Like, we have times that we say, guys, listen, training starts at 6:30. We're not fucking around. We've got 60 minutes, so I want everybody clicked in and ready to go, like, on arrival. And so then guys are driving, and it's like they're not listening to music and taking fucking 40 phone calls and listening to music and doing all shit. They're in their game, and they are making the switch, right? Sometimes you might, something's happening when you're driving and you're just living life, and all of a sudden you got to click in. You got to get to that state. And it's like you can't just wait to emotionally or mentally react to a negative threat stimulus thinking you're going to land in this, nirvana state, right? Well, maybe it happens, but, maybe that's the God of War looked down upon you favorably that day and you got lucky. I don't know, but I don't like luck. Luck's great, but you got to have training with luck. You know what I mean? So I work the process because the process works. So anyways, that is our nitrous oxide system, right? Staging. You can do staging, you can do combat staging. It's 3 simple steps. You center, you connect, you zero. Hopefully people find some value in this. Again, it's a bit more of an advanced topic tonight, but here's the thing. You don't have to be advanced to understand. What we're trying to share with people is a lot of people, they don't know the depths of, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know the layers of training that goes into this process. This is not where you start. You don't start with the staging process. Because it's just simply, you don't have the foundation there to build this on. You got to start with the foundational work. What are the strategies, tactics, and tools? Understanding, the bad guy blueprints, understanding the sequencing of violence, understanding your legal rights, building out your very basic inner control box, right? Most people have never worked, tactical self-talk or tactical performance imagery or cognitive counter-response training. They've never gone through even a tenth of the tactical arousal control techniques. Just those 4 areas alone. But all of that is how you build a foundation. And then once the foundation is built, then it's like, well, what do you want to be? You can go from 0 to formidable as the foundation. Then you want to go from formidable to tactical. And then you want to go to tactical to fucking surgical. So, where do you want to go? For me, I had a guy just the other day where, he's requested more information. I was talking to him. And, and his thing, he said it 4 or 5 different times in the conversation. How do you put a price tag on the life of your family? How do you put how do you value the skill sets that could save your family's life? I get it. Where do we think that guy is going to go? Formidable, tactical, or surgical? Surgical. Because you can't put a price. For me, I can't. It's my fundamental core rights is I believe in the right to life, and I believe in the freedom to defend that life. So every day I wake up, and every day I train, every day I weaponize, every day I try to get better. And all I can do is work the process. That's it. Right? And I know that the process works. So that's what I do. So hopefully people found value in this and see it for the sleeper system, the nitrous oxide, this just will, turbocharge your protector mindset if you can understand the frameworks that we're sharing and really apply them, or at least work to the point where you can go, I want to get to that level where I can start building out that system, those frameworks, because it'll take you to a whole different level. Okay. Brad, any final thoughts on this one?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well. So I'm
All right.
good with it.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time again, Brad. As always, appreciate you sharing your 25 plus years of experience and knowledge with everybody. Again, for anyone that happens to listen to this, please like, share, follow. This is how we grow this. We don't ask, we have no other ask. We're not trying to sell shit. I genuinely believe that we have a problem in this world. There's not enough good men that are weaponized, that understand how to protect themselves. Whether you get that training through us or you find it somewhere else, whatever fits for you, whatever allows you to take action to make yourself infinitely safer, that is what I am in favor of. That is what I want good men to do. We share this just in the hopes that we can spark thinking, thought, and motivate people to action. That is what we need, men of action. And so that's our mission. Anytime you share, like, comment, that's how we spread this. We're doing it organically and just looking for the right men, the 5%ers, the majority of the world's population. They're not protectors. They're not warriors. They don't have this mindset. They'll do nothing about it. And so that's not who we're looking for. It's not who we're talking to. So if it is you, thank you. We appreciate you. Stay safe, stay weaponized, and we will chat again soon.